Hello, and welcome to the Producers Guild conversation with the creative team behind MINARI. We'd like to thank our friends at A24 for making this event possible. We encourage you to participate in our conversation today by submitting your written questions for our panelists in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Simply type in your question and our moderator will do his best to present them to our guests. Speaking of moderator, it is my pleasure to introduce ours today. Pete Hammond is currently the chief film critic for Deadline Hollywood. For the past 9 years, he has also been awards editor and columnist for Deadline, where he covers the Oscar and Emmy seasons. He is widely considered to be one of the preeminent awards season analysts for film and television. Welcome, Pete. Welcome, panelists. And Pete, please take it away.
Thanks, Kyle. But enough about me. We're here to talk about MINARI, which I just loved, and I hope you did too. It's a very special film, and you got some very special people behind it. Let me introduce them to you first off here. The writer, director, the man who came up with this in the first place, Lee Isaac Chung, right here. Hi there. And then the multi-Oscar winning awards-laden team, so many different movies through Plan B, Moonlight, Vice, The Big Short, 12 Years a Slave, Tree of Life. You can go on and on with the credits that they have individually and together here. But we have Jeremy Kleiner. Hi, Jeremy.
Hey.
And Dede Gardner.
Hi, Pete.
Hey. And Christina Oh. Hi. And Lee, let me start with you because we're going to start with the written word and where this came from and how this idea came to you. You have a bit of a personal connection. This isn't your life story, but there is part of that inspiration, I think, behind it.
Yeah, I started working on this script in 2018. And I guess there were a lot of different things that were happening in my own life. And I had for a long time wanted to tell a story about the way that I grew up in Arkansas. And my daughter was becoming the age that I was back when we first moved to Arkansas. So I was kind of seeing things through her eyes a little bit more. And while that was happening, I read this quote by Willa Cather after I read My Antonia, in which she said that for her life really began when she stopped admiring and she started remembering. And she was talking about her creative work. And I kind of felt that way about my own work, that maybe I had been really just trying to admire other films with what I'd been doing in the past. And it felt as though the time was right for me to try to start remembering and to do something that comes a little bit more from my own life experiences. So this film really started as an exercise in which I just started to jot down a bunch of memories from childhood. And I had about like 80 memories down. And I started to see the semblance of a story, one that starts with the way that we arrived on this farm in Arkansas, in which my mom had no idea that my dad was gonna do this. And that it would end with a fire and then a MINARI patch. Like that was my general idea of where it starts and where it ends. And then I don't know, I reordered all the memories and I kind of fleshed out all the characters. And it took me maybe that whole year to write this script. And finally the script made its way to Christina Oh. So that's kind of how it all happened on my end. That was what happened.
Christina Oh, here's working with Plan B, did The Last Black Man in San Francisco, tremendous film that she shepherded early on, and others. And talk about what sparked when you got this script. How did this happen?
Well, I think so. I worked on Okja for Bong Joon-ho, and it's a movie that we made with him, and it was really great. And I developed a relationship and met Stephen Yun during that filming process, and then we were kind of I think from that I got sent a lot of Asian material, like things that were Korean, and I always felt like, ooh, I don't know if I would be like the best person to shepherd a story like this. But then when I read Isaac's script, which came from a conversation of Steve and I were just like talking with him, he's like, have you read this? And I was like, no, I'll take a look. And it was the first time I read something where it really resonated with me on a personal level. And not like, I didn't grow up on a farm or anything, but my parents were immigrants from Korea, and the story just felt so authentic in its telling of family dynamics and what a family goes through when, you know, when the kids are kind of, you know, I was born here, so the kids were born here and they kind of like don't know what the parents are doing, but you are going along for the ride and you see them working really hard and they're kind of not around sometimes, but they're trying to build the best life for you. And it was the first time I was like, whoa, I feel like I really see what my parents went through and what the toll it took on the family and their relationship. And in that, I thought it was really beautiful and really truthful. And that's kind of what drew me to the story in the first place. And then I talked to Dede and Jeremy about it, and they're like, yes, let's do this. And so I worked on, Isaac and I worked on it a bit to just bring it to that next level. And then we obviously got A24 involved, and they've been really great partners throughout all of this, but that's like the quick version.
Wow. Yeah. Well, Jeremy, you were telling me earlier, you know, the connection with Oksha when you were doing that, and how this came in. And so you and Dede, you know, you have your magic touch, I call it. You guys really have had a run, as it were. And of course, Brad Pitt and Plan B and all of that. But why did you think immediately when she came to you guys that this was the right fit, this movie?
Well, first of all, just to give Christina the appropriate level of props. I mean, she's an incredible producer and brilliant and very discerning. And so I think, you know, when she speaks in favor of something with a level of passion, it's really, really meaningful. I think also, we love to work with writers that direct their own work, or directors that write their own work. And so Isaac is part of a tradition, I think, of wanting to support a very personal story that an artist wants to tell. I also think just my memories of reading the brilliant screenplay that Isaac wrote are colored by a feeling that he was doing something that was actually quite epic, that he had written an epic film. It happens to be a film that Christina made for extremely low budget. Christina and Isaac and all of their collaborators made for extremely low dollars in the scorching heat in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is not really a production center most of the time. You know, it has enormous equity in the film, as they say. But even though the film happens to be a low budget film, which with an incredibly high degree of difficulty, it's an epic, and it follows in a tradition, I think, of you know, literature and films that I love. Like when I think about I'm sorry to embarrass you, Isaac, by referencing things like this, but you know, if it is, but like, you know, I think about Grapes of Wrath, or I think about, you know, some of Arthur Miller's work, or think about, you know, these canvases about, you know, individual people in sort of these American spaces trying to dig out a life for themselves. But I think that we're used to seeing that with, white American families. I think seeing a Korean family and that perspective on coming to America in that environment of the Deep South and farming, and, you know, that sort of that idea that, you know, anything you get by the sweat of your brow. And if you don't, and if the crops fail or there's natural disasters, you know, that sort of biblical landscape. And I think Isaac was able to make something incredibly, and it was on the page, incredibly epic and kind of gigantic. And yet it didn't lack for intimacy, and it has these wonderful elemental relationships, husband, wife, you know, grandmother, grandson, mother, daughter. And I just thought that was so cool. So we were super excited to get involved.
Yeah, for Dede, what was it about this script that sparked for you, that you could relate to, that you thought this will cross over into universality with among audiences, which it has done since Sundance, since it premiered. This was the movie you heard about this year. People said, yo, I like this movie. I like this. Oh, I love Minari. I love this movie. You heard it over and over. So it's one of those kind of movies, special movies.
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to what Jeremy said, I recognized both its profound intimacy and the degree to which it let you inside the family and didn't pull the punch of discomfort and dis-ease and fraughtness. And I also believe it to be a really big story in its elemental nature. And it was in a part of the world that I knew nothing about, but think I should know about. And it felt, the script felt exceedingly generous in its embrace, in its intention to let you into a very personal experience, which I think the physics of that generosity sort of render it bigger and bigger, as it moves down the path to expression.
Yeah, you've had a good relationship with A24. How did you get it to them? How did you decide that this was going to continue that? You obviously did Last Black Man, San Francisco, Moonlight, others. Why them?
Well, it just seemed, I mean, we love them, they're our family. And ever since partnering with them on Moonlight, we went to Moonlight. Moonlight was their very first production. And we just marched down the track on that one. And then the minute we saw the Last Black Man script, we thought, oh, this is for that family, this relationship. And then when we got the script from MINARI, again, it was just like, oh, let's go do it. Just and I'm, I hope we're looking for the next one. It's just been a real pleasure. We make them, they're small in their production size, but ambitious in their intention, and I think in their ideas. And now there's such fluency with them that it's really fun, actually.
Yeah, you deal with all these different distributors this time of year, and there's the Netflixes of the world that seem to be juggling 20 films and trying to be, and there is this boutique place that has success after success, but keeps it small. Is that important, Jeremy, to have that kind of relationship? It's unusual now with all these big streamers.
Yeah, I mean, I think to Dede's point, there's ambition, like this. I mean, they it was like as Isaac said, I think the timing from script delivery to Christina to production was like insanely short, right? Christina, it was like,
yeah, I mean, by the time the time that I got this script to the time we won Sundance was less than a year, which I thought was like, I mean, I've seen movies that have taken like 8 years, like within our own company, but it was something that we just kind of were like, we got him, we were like, we know what to do. We want to partner with A24 and they'll help us shepherd it on this track.
I think that the reason that something like that can happen is that there is this space of trust.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like, okay, it's a bilingual film. How many bilingual films are made, in the United States? Not that many. There's some, but it's pretty uncommon. It's in a place, it wasn't shot in Atlanta. It wasn't shot in New Orleans. It wasn't shot in Boston. It wasn't shot in Pittsburgh. There's some production there. And a lot had to get done on, very few days, relatively speaking. And yet they have a culture of going like, okay, these people almost like wouldn't be coming to us if they didn't believe. Like we weren't. It's the nature of the dynamic on these films that we've made with them is that it's a self-selecting thing. Like we're gonna bring them that which we are willing to throw ourselves in front of a train for, and that's a great incentive structure because we don't want to let them down. And I think they want us. They give us the benefit of the doubt, and I think that's why their work. It's why they're they tend to be present at this time of year. I think because they They have a really special culture.
Yeah, I mean, they were truly such supporters. Like, I think we talked about the film sometime in March, and then they were like, we were prepping by June, the top of June.
Yeah, you know, Jeremy used the word epic in some ways of describing it, and does have a kind of a feel of an epic in some ways, very intimate too. And then you mentioned Isaac, you mentioned, yeah, and I'm doing this story, and it's going to end with this big fire and things. And I'm wondering, the producers are going, what? You know, okay, is that CGI, or, you know, how, how intense? Because you're working on a limited budget. So, you know, when you create this script, how did you get your way? Have that big fire? And that was a very exciting sequence too. I mean, it was amazing.
Well, yeah, knowing that the film there, it does pull back from very big budget spectacle sorts of elements. So just knowing that the story itself, the arc itself, is going towards this big fire, the fire has to pay off. So I think it was easy to just get everybody on the same page with that, basically to say that there needs to be a fire, it needs to pay off for the audience, it needs to be a spectacle in itself. You know, it needs to be able to work and feel fraught with danger and all these things. And it seemed like the only way we could do that is to actually build a real fire. So it was kind of a gamble, because you know, we only got one take out of that, that burning, and we were stressed.
It's a very stressful day.
I can imagine.
But you know, it's funny. It's bringing up something, and I think, you know, it speaks to like what Isaac pulled off, and Harry and the editor. It's like remember, Dede, when we saw it for the first time, we said something like, "This film has so much tension in it. Like, you are like on the edge of your seat, like desperately wishing that things will turn out well, but all the while aware that it's not going to go that way." So there is this sense of unease. And I think the fire is the catharsis, right, by which it emerges finally, right? There's all these, you know, even the scenes of, you know, with eggs, you know, and sort of everything is so fragile, you know, the you know, entering the mobile home, you know, like, are they going to get inside the mobile home? It's like those are so fraught, and I don't quite know how Isaac pulled that off, but it's the fire is the place where finally, okay, the bad thing that we've been sensing, you know, finally emerges.
Yeah, definitely. I do want to remind the participants out there, if you do have a question out there, put it in the Q&A feature here on the Zoom on the lower half. And I'm going to ask Isaac about the casting, which is pretty much perfection down the line. And, you know, talk about how you did cast this film and get these actors, one of whom is sort of known as the Meryl Streep kind of Korea, I believe, you know, South Korea. She's got an extraordinary career playing the grandmother, but from her to David, the actor that plays David, just kind of magical casting here.
Yeah, with the schedule that we had, we were so fortunate to get the actors that we did, especially in Korea. A lot of the actors tend to be booked out quite far in advance, and we just really lucked out with both Youn Yuh-jung, who plays the grandmother, and Han Ye-ri, who plays Monica. I met them through a producer friend of mine named Ina Lee. She got me in touch with them after she had read the script, and I was already a fan of Youn Yuh-jung's work, so I you know, immediately I knew that she would be perfect for this. And Han Ye-ri, once I got to know her and once I started watching her films, I couldn't imagine anyone else playing it. So I was living in Korea at the time, and that's kind of how they came on board. But before that, Steven came on board, and with him, I'm actually married to his cousin. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. My cousin is married to him. Sorry, this is all getting confusing. So I already knew him, but we never really talked about work. I didn't know him all that well. And he just coincidentally started to work with my agent and my agent shared the script with him, and she got us together to talk about this, and we were both a little bit cautious and weren't sure, if we should do this. But he read the script and he really liked it, and yeah, so that's how he came on board. And once those three were on board, I basically created like a family portrait, and I just was trying to plug in the two kids and figure out how do we complete this family portrait, because I knew that through some kind of intuitive feeling, we needed to really feel like this is a family. And Julia Kim, our casting director, cast this wide net across the US. She's Korean American, and she kind of knew the places where a lot of Korean Americans who are bilingual might be. And these two, they're non-professional. They'd never acted before. And they sent in audition tapes. We got around like 90 tapes. And these two stood out from the start. And yeah, the rest is history.
We spent a lot of time, like, so Julia probably, she went to like Korean school, after school things and churches and little acting classes, and really did some deep grassroots searching. And it was so important for us to get the David character right, because he kind of does some things in the film that are not cool. Like how we wanted to make sure we bought a kid who served his grandmother pee, but then like could get away with it. And that was something that was we were super vigilant on. And once we saw David, we were both like, this kid is like so amazing. And we had to do everything over like Skypes at the time, because it was everyone was super far away, like in different parts of the country. And then we met him in person. We brought them in, and he did a little chem test with Steven, and it was just like we were like, done. This is it. This is the family.
Kid got the job.
He got the
job. I also, Isaac, am interested in the what you got into the script and into the movie is the actual Korean language. When these kind of movies are set in America, they're generally speaking in English and people will accept it. In real life, this family would probably be speaking Korean to each other, and you didn't let that be a barrier in putting that in that way.
Yeah, I'll be honest that when I first wrote it, I just kind of assumed that maybe I need to skew a lot towards English with it. So I wrote it with that in mind. And Christina actually encouraged me once she did get the script to try to make it as realistic as possible, the way that the language would be spoken. So I credit her with that. And we had a lot of help from a friend who came and helped on production named Stephanie Hong. She sat down with the Korean, because my Korean's not perfect. So she really sat down and figured out how to translate what was written to the most natural form of what would be spoken.
Yeah, and what we also wanted to do is like both of us, our parents are Korean immigrants, and we never spoke English to them primarily growing up. I spoke Korean to my parents. My parents still speak Korean to this day, far better than their English, even though they've been here for over 30 years. And so at least for me, and I really wanted to encourage Isaac to keep all that stuff in there, just because that's the authentic feel of how I grew up. And I think hopefully it resonates with audiences in that way.
Yeah, I think it does. And, with all the emphasis in the last 4 years and the building of walls and the whole thing about immigrants in this country, this movie is a very human look, first and foremost, and seeing the true meaning of what this country was built on and that. And I thought the timing of it is so important right now.
Yeah, for me, that was a big thing that went into writing this. I mean, the political landscape was really weighing on me, because I grew up in the South, and I kind of noticed that there's this automatic barrier that we've created between immigrants and farmers. In a way, we assume that these two are meant to be separate, but for me, like, I feel I identify with both. So I felt like if we could make this story, it could somehow speak to a more universal human sort of identity, rather than just these two separate spheres.
Yeah. Now we have a couple of questions from the audience, Producers Guild audience here. Mark Marriott wants to know, how did you find your cinematographer?
I love DPs and researching about DPs. It's something that I think Dede and Jeremy have trained me well in. And I was a big fan of Lachlan from Hunt for the Wilderpeople, which is a movie he shot with Taika. And there's a kid in there, and there's a lot of nature. And I had a meeting with him and thought he was just such a, on top of being super talented, just a very kind person and had a great eye for things. And the way he spoke about the material as somebody who isn't Korean and isn't from America even. And so then I had Isaac meet with him, and Isaac, I don't know, like you really liked him as well, right?
Yeah, I think the first conversation I had with him, I thought, this is the guy. It has to be Lockie. And he's just tremendous. Like, he's talented. He's a soldier when it comes to actually filming. He can get down and dirty and do all that needs to be done. But all the while, he just has an incredible sense of humor. You just want to be around him. And I just knew that this is going to be a high pressure film, and to work with someone like that, it's going to be really good for all of us.
And yeah, and with the budget that we had, we definitely wanted to make sure that the film didn't feel like a tiny indie movie, which we were so lucky that Lachlan was able to come on board and really give the film some scope and scale and a lot of beauty.
Yeah, he was really good with natural light. I noticed in his past work, he's paid so much attention to that, to making things look very natural. And I knew we'd have a lot of stuff that's set in nature, and we could really use his eye for that.
And then we have Gabby Leibowitz wants to, she's a Tulsa native here. So as a Tulsa native in the film industry, I'm curious how you decided on shooting in Tulsa and the surrounding area. I don't know if she thinks that's a good thing or a bad thing, but there you have it. Why Tulsa?
Well, we did want to try and shoot where the film takes place in Arkansas, but there isn't much of a base there. And our line producer and I, we spent a lot of time like looking at maps in terms of how to like mimic the sort of, because it's a very different sort of environment than say Oklahoma City. So we actually brought up a map of Oklahoma and tried to just find where we could get that kind of verdant, lush Arkansas feel without, it's only an hour and a half from actually where the story takes place. So that's kind of how we landed on it, along with the tax incentives.
There is a big tax incentive in Oklahoma.
There was weirdly one that we were able to take advantage of, and it was super, super helpful, obviously. And we have immense gratitude to that city for taking us in.
Yeah, they were very motivated to have us, right? Yeah.
It was very hot though.
And Anthony Dominici, congratulations to all of you on a beautiful film. How close was the final film to the script? Did things change or develop during production? And how pre-visualized versus organic was your directing approach? That's terrific.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Dominique.
Closeness to the script, we took out a little bit. I think our original cut was like 2 hours and 40 minutes, and that's staying true to the script. So we tried to pare it down to let it work in a more essential way. So there were certain scenes and moments that we took out. The general order is there. Harry was very good in figuring out a slight reordering in the middle section. But for the most part, what's written for the dialogue and I don't know, there wasn't that much improvisation away from the dialogue, I felt. So if you read along the script, you can kind of follow along the film. Let's see, and in terms of the directing approach, I don't tend to storyboard, and with this film in particular, because we're working with 2 young children, there had to be a lot of improvisation in terms of on the day, on the moment, figuring out, what's the best setup in order to try to capture this scene as best as possible. Because I knew that if we started off with a very strict hierarchy or strict systematic approach, and ask the children to fit into that, then it's not going to really work. They're not going to be that natural. So we tried to respond a little bit more to them. And also, another thing I like to do is to give actors a lot of say in the blocking and what they want to do in a scene. So we kind of try to discuss the scene a lot before we do a lot of the setup. And Lockie and the lighting team, they were great at being there and really checking out what we should do and figuring out the best look and responding. So, yep.
All right, before we have to go, I want to ask Jeremy, Dede. So this is coming out at a very difficult time for the movie business and theaters and the traditional way you would launch a movie here. But it's opening next week. How is it opening, and what's the thinking behind the release of the film? How are you moving ahead with it?
Should I take that one?
Yeah, sure.
Difficult in what sense, Pete? No, I'm joking.
Well, let me count the ways.
I think, listen, A24 are an innovative company, and they have a scrappy, culture in terms of how they get movies to people. So the plan at the moment, is to do this, qualifying run in theaters, and then we've talked about, expanding around the Korean New Year in February. And I think we, their team are like anybody else reacting organically to, the changes in the world, and I think we'll pivot, with the ways of the world. But I think we feel like this is a movie that, audiences are going to find, and the exact mechanics of being an independent film at this time that doesn't have a default streaming platform is something that's new. But I think, and we've been lucky enough to do it with them. We've been able to what's the word, punch sort of above our weight before with them, and I'm confident that we're going to find a way this time.
Yeah, well, it's definitely worth checking out, and I hope it gets a lot of attention this award season too, because that can certainly help too. And when you go wider and theaters begin to open again everywhere, this is definitely one worth seeing on the screen. And I plan to see it again when I can see it on a bigger screen too. Congratulations on it, all of you, and thanks for joining the PGA tonight with this special screening. Thanks, guys.
Pete,
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.